What's up everybody, Slash here. Today we're going to be revisiting God Trunks. I think it's a bit of fun and it is a very strong deck, especially now with the new support. Very unfortunate that I made a deck list previously and then suddenly, boom, support. But that happens, and that is great that it did happen. So, of course, when it comes to your turns 1, 2, and 3, you can always look at the previous video to get a good idea of what you can do. But here we're just going to be taking a look more or less at what the deck now runs, what has been changed, and kind of less what you can do with it now. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. So, here we are. Here's the deck. We have the Trunks leader itself. If you don't know it by now, you can always check out the previous video, see what it is, but today we're just taking a little look at some of the cards that we've changed and the new support and more or less what it can do. So, let's jump into it. We have replacement. We've now added one of the Berserk Instincts Gokus. This is just a good of one card. You could try and run more, but 55 for the deck is already a lot. You won't really notice it too much because you're sending a lot of cards from your top of your deck to your warp, of course, in order to awaken and use your effects. So that's no problem. We're also running one Dark Broly now because we need a little bit of board removal. Of course, we've got our Cumbers that can help stall your opponent. So you can hit those cards that are in rest mode and now they can't restand during their next turn. We also run our Brainwashed. This is just a good little floodgate as well towards your opponent down here. If your leader is black and you remove this card from the game, until the start of your next turn, your opponent can't attack with battle cards or unisons unless they choose one card in their life and place it in their drop each time. It's very strong. This is really underestimated, this ultimate. It's actually pretty good for a cheap ultimate. This is a double strike servant, so it's going to be a 50k double strike to your opponent. So it can be a handy game finisher. And then, of course, if you boost with this card, you can give it the additional 10k from it, plus the 5k from the boost itself. But then this will be played on your opponent's field, so you want to be careful doing that. And then, of course, for the rest, we have the new support of the Supreme Kai. This card is so good. You pay 1. If you have this in your warp, and let's say you have a Unison in your warp or in your hand, you can pay 1, place 1 card from your hand at the bottom of your deck, and then you can add up to 2 lives to your hand. You don't have to. And then from that, you can play your Unison from either your warp or your hand with 2 markers on it. 2 markers, not 1. That is awesome. So we get our Unison on the board for turn 1. Then we're able to do the ability from your Unison, which is put your top 3 to your warp. Once you've done that, you've now got 3. Then from your leader, you're at 4. So it's pretty easy to get all Saiyans into your warp because like 99% of this deck is just Saiyans in general. But yeah, so the new card for this deck is the SSG Trunks Sealing Power. This card is really good. Reason being as well is because if early game you don't want to get rid of anything in particular from your hand, you can activate this permanent, and this is, if this card is in your warp, you can also activate this card's Xeno Evolve skills from your warp, which is very relevant because now you don't mind if you lose this card, if you end up, warping it, or if you end up just wanting to boost with it, and then, of course, overwhelm something and then play it from your warp. So that's just perfect. This is a unique triple strike barrier. Barrier, my friends. Barrier. That is awesome. 30k barrier for 1 energy and a spirit boost 1. And then, of course, the other effect down here is when this card attacks, choose up to 1 of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and send it to its owner's warp. And that's amazing that it's when it attacks. So that way, the next turn when you attack, you can do the same thing again. It's a very good card. I wouldn't run more than 3, and I wouldn't run less than 3. I think 3 is the perfect amount. I've always seen the card, never had a problem with it. And, of course, the other new support is the Z Leader. Now, the Z Leader is a Spirit Boost 1. So, of course, there's like Black Smoke Dragon and things like that, which are a pain in the ass to deal with. But you're not really having to worry too much about it because if you lose your Unison, you're able to just play it back very easy because of the new support. So what you're doing is you Spirit Boost 1, if your life's 3 or less, and your leader is a Trunks Xeno, you play this on top, you got a 20k, it's 2 Z energy, that's not bad, it's pretty easy to do. I've never had a situation where, you struggle a little bit trying to figure out what you want to use. This activate main though, once per turn, Spirit Boost 1, is really, really good. If you place 2 black battle cards from your warp into your drop, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, send it to its owner's warp. Additionally, if you have your Unison in play, this card gets 5k and double strike. It's such a good ability. The only downside is it should have been activate battle, just so that you could choose to do it at that option, rather than having to do it as an activate main. But it's still, in general, I mean, you're going to have markers on your Unison, so it's no problem. It's a lot of pressure to your opponent. This deck is so much better than it was before, and the deck was already pretty good, because there's not that many black decks that have like a good floodgates or like defense for black. So I found that this deck, having the pan, is just so good. That's why we run 4 copies, also with the Bardock, and then we've got the effect from this card in as well. Just for that little bit of floodgates, so that way, since we're not being able to remove that many cards, we're able to just keep stalling them that little bit. And then of course this is kind of handy too. For the bottom effect, if you really need to play something from your warp and deal with it, you've got this effect, which is just pretty handy, because now that will pop off this ability, where if your leader's a Trunks Xeno, when the battle card is played from your warp, draw 1, add a marker to this card. So yeah, and then the Z deck is not much change, just the new Trunks Z leader. And for side deck options, if you want to go a bit more slower pace, like less damage, but then have a bit more cards in hand and tempo the deck out, you've got Demon God Poutine. It's a pretty handy card. It's a blocker. It practically is a dual attack for 1 energy. It's going to stay on the field. If you want to go more aggressive, you could run more copies of Berserk Instinct. You've got Secret ID for an option as well if you don't want to run the Broly. So you can remove multiple cards, not just the one. And then of course Koitsukai, which I took out because I just found that there are less battle card counterplays against this deck now, because you're running a lot of higher energy cost cards, and you don't really have to deal with those counterplays as much, but you can always just add some in if you wanted to. 55 is the absolute limit I would go. If you want to go real consistent, you could drop it to 52. 50 it doesn't really matter, because 52, you're warping cards from the top of your deck, so you're going to thin out your deck pretty quick. 55, I've never noticed. I ran 50 originally. I went to 55. I didn't even notice. I just noticed that when I verse yellow and green and blue, if you're versing slower decks, I just have a little bit more cards in deck. But I'm still seeing a lot of the things that I need, because we're running a lot of multiples of. So we're never having an issue of like, oh, I'm not seeing my pan, or, you know, I need my Trunks and my warp. You're always going to see them. So that's never a problem. And yeah, this is the deck. I hope you like it. If you haven't subscribed already, do so. If you like the video, like it. If you don't, you don't. Thanks for watching. Peace. Links to the deck will be in the video description.